Today we talk about when to plant to avoid damage from frost. We'll talk about cheat to avoid it too. We'll talk about feeding and watering and a couple of tricks that I do.
It is a beautiful, almost summer-like day in the garden. Things are green. Looks like a great day to go out and transplant all your fabulous tomatoes and peppers and things like that, so you can get a really good head start on the grow season. Except the problem is tomorrow it's supposed to go below 0, and then Tuesday it's supposed to feel like -7, and all of my plants will start hurting below 5 degrees. Not all my plants, but the tomatoes, things we just talked about that really like warm temperatures, will need to have at least 5 degrees to be happy, and they start getting damage below that and they will die dead at 0. So we're going to talk about hardiness zones.
Oh, wax ledge darkened from dirt and grinds. Break all your bones before they're grown. You'll never pay off all of your loans.
Hardiness zone refers to the number of frost-free days you have in your growing season. So what you have is around the world at a certain latitude, meaning a certain distance from the pole and the equator, you have zone 4. We're all zone 4, whether you are in Ottawa, which we are actually zone 4, or maybe somewhere over in, Russia that has the same dark blue color on this map, they would also be zone 4, which means they also would have their last frost-free day would be around May 24th, and they would also have 100 growing days. If you are on the equator, you're going to have the whole year round. If you're further north or closer to the South Pole than you would be, then you're going to have a shorter growing season.
Let's wake the world and sing them back to sleep, but people don't listen. So
Cheat to start your season early and end it late. You want to max out your frost-free days.
Okay, we're going to talk about cheating in terms of our hardiness zone. So we have a hardiness zone of 4B, which means our last day of frost is normally around May 24th, but I cheat. And so here's a couple of different ways we can cheat. Here's what I do. Make like a mini greenhouse, which you guys can totally make with any sort of plastic that you can get sun to go through. Even white plastic will work. And then the idea is you need to then cover it down to the ground. So I have my plastic going to the ground, and then it goes over the top, so it lets the sun in, warms everything up, but then the heat stays in there. Trick is you have to water more because rain won't get in there, so you have to do a little bit more watering, but it's worth it. The other thing you can do, like a real big cheat, if you look way over here, is I have a chimney coming out of this greenhouse, so you can heat it. So that would have been for earlier. I'm not heating anymore. Actually, I might turn it on for a couple nights this week. But for you guys, it would just be having it in your kitchen. Being in your kitchen is a heater as long as you have like a window facing south, ideally. It'll start things up before May 24th. And then a third thing that's a really quick one, if you've got stuff in the garden, you're worried, and it's gonna like frost tonight, so what do? So you get any sticks or whatever. What I do is I have this wire. And then you take the wire and you put it across whatever you want to protect. So I have these wires in the width of my rows. So there's my row, here's my wire. So I'll come along and I'll put a whole bunch of these wires along. So they sort of stand off the ground just a little bit. There's a little bit of a space there. And then I come in with this row cover material and I put some stuff over it. So then I can just lay that on top and it'll keep a light frost off of it. And so if you guys are getting scared, your tomatoes are out there and you're not sure what to do, you can just go grab some old sheets or plastic bag, garbage bags, whatever. You don't want the plastic touching the plants though, because that'll just conduct the cold and kill the plants just as well. You have to keep the cover, whatever it is, plastic, old sheets, whatever it is, not touching the plants. That's about it. So when you cover something like that, you basically go down one hardiness zone. So what I do with this unheated greenhouse is I change us from living in Ottawa to feel like we're living in like Windsor, Ontario, or somewhere that's about 1 hardiness zone warmer. And if you could actually do the row cover inside there, which will be 2 hardiness zones. Now, if I do that inside, it's a lot of work. But it would be like I'd be growing something in, I don't know, maybe New Hampshire? Anyways, but another hardiness zone down. So in my greenhouse over the winter, I had 3 different levels. I had my outdoor shell, I had one of these guys inside, and then I had the row cover, plus the heat. And I was able to keep stuff alive.
Now we're going to talk about being super efficient with our garden space by making sure every plant gets the space that it needs for its leaves and its roots. And it all depends. It'll always tell you what the spacing is. But I'm going to use one of my favorite garden toys to try and help explain all the different types of spacing you need to consider when you are planting seeds. Seed depth, plant spacing in the row, and row spacing. This is an automatic seeder that takes care of row spacing, plant spacing within the row, and seed depth all at the same time.
Is first of all, we worry about seed depth, right? So how deep do you plant your seed? The rule of thumb was 3 times the width of a seed. But every seed has its own depth. It says on the package, so 2 centimeters, 1 centimeter, half a centimeter if it's really small. And this little guy, the way it works, is a little chute that comes in. That's where the seed comes down, and then you put this plow onto it, and that plow will actually dig down to a certain depth to deposit the seed at the right depth. This chain then brings it back over, like gets the dirt back on top of the seed, and then the second wheel will tamp it down to get good soil contact. So that way you have right depth and good soil contact. The measuring part would happen more here, where inside there's wheels, and when you turn this front wheel, that wheel inside will go around and pick up seeds and put it down the chute at a certain distance. Okay, so I have different seeds. Different wheels will have different spacing and sizes and all that kind of stuff, but this plant's basically everything. So that does the spacing within the row. And then the last thing we need to worry about is the spacing between the rows. So here, this guy, as you're going along, will make a line that you can put all the way out to 2 feet, 1 foot, whatever, but that will give you the row spacing. Yeah, that's about it. And then often what you can do is you can mix things that need different spacing. So I always plant different things together. Yesterday I planted potatoes and raspberries because I can grow raspberries down the middle and then the potatoes I'll cultivate on the outside. If I have corn, I just planted spinach. So spinach is a quick small crop. I'll have 3 rows of spinach on the inside and then maybe 2 rows of corn on the outside. That way my corn is far enough apart. By the time the corn gets big enough to block the sun, spinach is done. So you can get all creative with that.
But you got a light bill too. You got a gas bill too. But you got a light bill too. You got a gas bill too.
To make sure your spacing is correct, you'll need string, something to measure with, and 2 sticks. When you get to the garden, you're going to stick one of your sticks into the ground at the end of one of your rows, and then you're going to tie the rope to it and go all the way to the other end of your row, put the stick in the ground and tie it again, and make sure it's nice and tight. So it gives you a nice straight line to plant along, whether it's seeds or plants. That should work perfectly fine. And then for your next row, you're just going to measure and then move the string and the sticks over that much. While you're planting up the row, it's a good idea to have an idea of what the spacing is based on a body part. So often I use my hand because it's there. So 6 inches, I will plant something and then put my hand the way it is on the measuring tape there to figure out, okay, well that's roughly 6 inches. Yeah, I'll plant the next one, and I just sort of go along like that. And then you'll have a nicely spaced, very efficient garden. So here's something specifically for seeds. You have to watch your tilth. So the idea is This is something that allows seeds to germinate properly. So if your soil has poor tilth, it's going to be chunky and the water will just run right through and the seeds will drop down way too far. You want to have a fluffy tilth. I'll show you what I mean.
So when you go to plant your seeds and you're trying to germinate your seeds in the ground in the garden, right before you do that, you want to make sure you have good tilth. So you're looking at the soil and you're looking to see if the particles are small enough to touch the seeds really, really well. Because if the seeds aren't touching soil, they will not pick up water, they will not germinate. So if you look right here, these are big chunks. Not great for little seeds, especially, this is especially important for little seeds like carrots and stuff like that. You could go along and break all these parts up really, really well, but that takes forever. You don't have time. So what you do is you buy a giant bag of peat moss if you have really bad soil. And just after you put your string down, come along and just add some peat moss. So this is milled peat moss. And by doing that, you have just improved the tilth tremendously. And you'll be able to germinate your seeds much, much better. It's a little bit of peat to cheat getting better tilth.
As everybody knows, you need to water your garden. So here we're going to talk about making sure your garden has at least 2.5 centimeters per week, which is a strange concept really, but the idea is if none of the rain evaporated, none of the rain soaked into your garden, you would see that it would be about 2.5 centimeters deep. So the way to do that is that you would hide a number of containers around your garden, not hide, sorry, place them around your garden in places where they would not be blocked from getting rain into them. So in paths and stuff like that around your garden. And then water as you would water. So for me, I have all sorts of sprinklers and stuff like that. For you, it would be a watering can or a sprinkler, whatever you use, doesn't matter. But water your garden as you would water it, and see how much water accumulates in these things. Then you know how much you've watered. It also works for regular rain. So leave it out there before rain. And if you see that everywhere got 2.5 centimeters, you're kind of good for the week. Okay, so our wonderful tilth and watering has got our seeds to sprout, and now we have to start feeding them, the plants. So plants really should start being fed if as soon as they're sprouted. So either your soil already has it or you're adding fertilizer. But there's different ways you can do it. You can add solid fertilizers that you buy at the store that you bury in the dirt. You can do it with compost. You can do it with liquid fertilizers that you're going to dissolve stuff into, like, and spray it on. Many different ways. But basically, you want to make sure the plants have all the nutrients they need so they can grow as fast as they can. And also, you want to make sure the microbial life, the fungi and the bacteria, are also getting all the nutrients they need. I'm going to show you what I do for supplementing my nutrients and encouraging lots of microbial life in my garden. I use all the paths. So all of my garden, like we talked about last time, is divided up into double reach rows or double wide rows. And the idea is you have these tiny little paths that don't take up too much of your growing space, allow you access. But I'm going to use these paths now to compost. I'll show you.
So we have these paths that aren't for growing, that we can still use. So these paths already are good for one thing. They gather water because they're nice and low, and they don't let the water run off. But the other thing we can do is add nutrients to our garden. So all season long, when you're going up and down, you're looking at stuff, you're pulling out weeds, you're going to throw your weeds into the path. And then as the season goes on, they'll break down, all like that. But sometimes they go another level, especially for things that are sort of set it and forget it type crops like potatoes or, what's another one? I always do it with potatoes. So let's just say potatoes. And so what you do is you take your kitchen compost, or you can actually just get a pile of organic waste and you throw it in there, just like that. And then you get your free mulch, hopefully. You don't want to spend money on this, but lots of places you can get free stuff, and you cover it. But you want to cover it really, really well. want to get about, let's say, I don't know, about 6 inches or 15 centimeters on top of it. That way it won't smell. But be sure that if there's dogs in the neighborhood or raccoons or anyone else, they will be able to smell it and they'll come in and find it. So I have a way to keep them out. So if you don't have a way to keep animals out, do not do this. But what will happen in a couple of years is this will be completely broken down. The stuff I put on top is what you call brown ingredients to compost. The stuff that went underneath, the slimy stuff, is what you call green or high nutrient stuff. And so what we've done is we made big compost piles all over our garden. So the whole garden gets big compost piles all the way through, which adds nutrients and microbial life, both your bacteria and your fungi.
Oh, he can fight now.